So good morning, everybody. Not many here yet. We know people are coming and invariably finding it hard to get out of bed on such a cold morning, I think.
I found it very difficult myself. Yeah.
So we're kind of holding off a little bit before I introduce Walter. Here comes a few more. All right. So this morning we're very happy and honored to have our good friend Walter Mason with us to explore the theme Spiritual Traveller Tales. Walter has many qualities that make for a good traveller. He has a keen and observant eye, a sense of adventure, boundless curiosity and sensitivity, an endearing, friendly openness, and a good deal of patience and endurance. So, and I've read Walter's books, I know he's got these qualities. On top of this, if you don't already know, Walter's a wonderful communicator. He's a great raconteur. He's the author of two much-loved books, Destination Saigon and Destination Cambodia. He's an active member of several literary societies. He's a blogger. He's past president of the New South Wales Charles Dickens Society. He's spoken at festivals and conferences around the world, and he teaches writing and journaling across Australia. And importantly, he's done a journal workshop for us. Yes. And I think very importantly, Walter's a sincere spiritual seeker and particularly devoted to but not limited to the Buddhist path. So now I'll hand over to you, Walter, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I've just returned from Vietnam. I was 6 weeks in Vietnam, which I do every year, and I also spent a week or so in Cambodia, and then I also travel other places throughout the year. But the focus will be on Vietnam mostly because it's just fresh in my memory. I often wonder if my whole life isn't created by my love of slide nights when I was a little kid. My aunt was the great devotee of the Methodist Church, and her best friend was a Methodist missionary, and she would travel throughout the world, and she would come back and she would show these slides of her adventures around the world, and everyone else would be falling asleep at the back of the hall, and I would be right at the front, absolutely to the very last slide, completely engaged with what this fascinating woman was doing. So I blame her for it all. But I thought today we'd start with Amitabha Buddha. A Di Đà Phật, he's known in Vietnamese. Here's a statue of him, and he's the Buddha of the Western paradise of Sukhavati, and he's sort of associated with the sun, which is why I wanted to bring him up. Often people when they use their malas, they will recite his name because it's believed that if he's the last thing you think of when you die, you will be reborn in his paradise, which is such a lovely idea. And the Western paradise of Amitabha Buddha has always appealed to me because it's filled with beautiful things, beautiful visions, beautiful smells. Everything's made of lovely jewels. But my favorite thing about the Western paradise is that there are no hills, mountains, or stairs. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful to stroll around, which I think is such a lovely idea. But what I recommend people is that they wake up early. Wake up early, at least once on your trip. Get up really, really early with the sun to get a bit of that sort of Amitabha energy flowing through you. The early morning, the sunrise is a spiritually powerful moment, and you'll see people you'll never otherwise see, and you'll see things that you won't see happening otherwise. And it's such a lovely and special time of the day. And of course, it's very difficult for us to get up at sunrise right at the moment. But even if you're somewhere where it's very cold, it's beautiful to wake up at that sunrise moment, because that's when Amitabha's power is said to be at its highest, but also when our own spiritual power is rising. And I believe this is common across spiritual traditions, this idea that the sunrise is a very spiritually powerful moment.
Yeah, so they talk about the whole of nature is a calm, there's a quiet.
That's it.
Just like sunset as well.
Yes, yes,
Nature becomes quieter.
that's
So
right.
it's easier to tune in. You just tune into that calmness and quietness. Yeah.
These moments of change, which we can barely notice sometimes. I kind of like now how you can ask Google exactly what time sunrise and sunset will be, because I sort of set myself the challenge of being in the right place at the right time. But I can remember when I was young, I was waiting to travel somewhere at dawn in Vietnam. Of course, Vietnam is very, very hot, and it was a dawn, and one didn't see much sort of sport or exercise in the streets normally, but at dawn everyone was jogging and doing exercises, and the whole world of health existed that I hadn't known about previously. So you discover all of these mysterious things when you choose to get up early in the morning. And I love the coolness of it as well. The coolness is a particular thing.
Well, yeah, especially in the tropics. Yes, it's the best time of day, really.
So the next thing I wanted to talk about and show you was the Arahants. Is anyone familiar with the Arahants? These were the first followers of the Buddha. So these were his first disciples, and they reach a stage of spiritual development. And according to some Buddhist schools, this is the highest stage that we can possibly hope for. So we should aim to become Arahants. Sometimes it's sort of falsely translated as saint, but that's not quite the right word for it either. But they still exist in the Mahayana world, the Mahayana Buddhist world of Vietnam, but they're slightly different characters. They're flawed. And they're represented as you see here in this photograph, they're represented as people with eccentricities and flaws, sometimes even with foolishnesses. And I always like that. And often they're at the side of a shrine to the Buddha. And so you're reminded of your own journey and the gentleness with which you treat yourself. Because if these great men, and they were all men, could still be so foolish even after having arrived at the feet of the Buddha, then I've got quite some way to go as well. I think this idea of the Arahants as flawed is very helpful in the spiritual path, because often people are very daunted by the idea of perfection. And so to be faced with imperfection right there in the holiest of places is quite good.
Are there stories about these arahants?
Each one has its own particular story. Yeah, there's no experts around. There's 32 of them, and each one has his own sort of little backwards story. The most famous, I think, that people would know about is Ananda. Ananda was the Buddha's closest follower, and he was the one. We can thank Ananda for Buddhism because he remembered every single thing that the Buddha said. So it's because of Ananda that we have Buddhism, because he could simply recite, he had this memory. And interestingly, Ananda, he never became enlightened because he was so fixated on what the Buddha had said and the Buddha's person that he couldn't let it go. And therefore enlightenment could not be reached. So he's one of the most interesting of them all.
So these stories about the arahants, they're like fables where they make a mistake, they go down a wrong path, and then they get some wisdom from that.
That's right. Yeah,
Their folly. I mean, they're like moral tales or fables.
I like this idea of a folly, which you just said. Each has pursued a folly, and it's kind of like they didn't aim high enough, and that's another reminder. They were aiming at emulating the Buddha, at being as good as the Buddha, but the aim is actually higher than that, to dissolve the Buddha, to dissolve oneself, and simply to more than to realize truth, but to be truth itself.
It's reminding me in Hinduism, I love the tales of Narada, kind of a wandering like minstrel, isn't he? And he's always wanting to learn and goes in for all kinds of adventures and learns along the way. Similar sort of thing, I feel, in the tradition. No.
Yeah, the necessity of making mistakes, and then the necessity, of course, afterwards of forgiving oneself for those mistakes. Another this one, I just okay. Ah, there we go. There we go. This is the fellow I wanted to talk about anyhow. His name is Bodhidharma. I don't know if you've come across him before, but Bodhidharma is considered in Vietnam to be the sort of the father of all monks. So all monastics look back to him as their great sort of founder. And he was the founder of he wasn't the founder. He was the person who brought Zen Buddhism to the East. He brought it from India to China. And he brought it to China, and there was already Buddhism had already been in China for several centuries. And so the emperor said to Bodhidharma, who had presented this new form of Buddhism, which emphasized meditation, and the emperor had said to him, sorry, we're not interested. We've already got Buddhism. So what Bodhidharma did was he went and sat in a room, and for 9 years he faced a wall and stared at the wall. And after this 9 years, the emperor said, oh, this is an interesting person. Bring him back to me. And so Bodhidharma then came back and was allowed to establish this form of meditation Buddhism. And it's because of him we've got all kinds of things. But it's said that one day he was, this is rather gruesome. You might want to block up your ears here. But it's said that one day he was meditating and he couldn't stop falling asleep. He kept falling asleep. So in irritation, he cut off his own eyelids and he threw them out the window. But from those eyelids sprouted the first tea bushes. So whenever we have a little cup of tea, we're also waking ourselves up in a spiritual way as well. So I always like to think that there's a little bit of Bodhidharma in every cup of tea that I have. And I seek him out because he's wonderfully flawed as well and interesting. And there's all sorts of stories about him. But my favorite story is about his shoe. So here's a statue of him, and above him a painting. And you'll notice in both, in the painting, he has a staff with a shoe hanging off it. And in the statue, he's holding onto a shoe. And the story is the Bodhisattva, who become one of the greatest Buddhist figures in China, one of the most famous men in the world, he just simply disappeared one day. He just simply disappeared from the temple, and no one ever knew what had happened to him. Everyone assumed he must have just gone away and died somewhere. And about 20 years later, a man came down from the mountains, a hermit, and he visited Bodhidharma's monastery. And he just mentioned casually, oh, I saw Bodhidharma the other day on the mountain. And everyone said, he's been gone for 20 years. What on earth? How did you see him? What did he say? He said absolutely nothing, he said. But he was only wearing one shoe. And that becomes a profound riddle that people meditate on for years. What became of Bodhidharma's other shoe? So I always go and visit him and ask him the question, and I haven't been given the answer. I'm sure it'll be the wrong answer anyhow when I get given it. But it's one of those riddles that you
Well,
can be
like a
given.
koan, like a koan.
It's koan. Yeah, it's precisely a koan. Along with things like what is the sound of one hand clapping, and does a dog have Buddha nature? My favorite koan is what became of Bodhidharma's other shoe. One of the great spiritual mysteries of the world, and I'm always asking after it. When I was in Vietnam just a couple of weeks ago, I managed to visit if we could just go to the next screen there. Yep. There's a new Buddhist training institute which is being established. It's about to open in a couple of weeks, actually. Well, at the end of the northern summer. And it's a beautiful place. And it's way, way, way out on the outskirts of Ho Chi Minh City, in a place which until a couple of years ago was a country town, but now it's a suburb of Ho Chi Minh City, which just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's a place called Bin Thian. And this new Buddhist institute, which I managed to visit, and is ready to open its doors. The interesting thing about it is that if we could have the next slide. that we go. It's not very important really, but it's being opened by nuns. It's being opened and run by nuns, which is quite a new thing in Vietnam, because let's face it, like most religions, Buddhism has until now, until very recent years, been a very, very patriarchal structure. And so often the nuns have had to sort of be subjected to the rules of the monks. Years and years ago, at the most famous Buddhist monastic training institute, the Van Han Buddhist Monastery in Ho Chi Minh City, in the morning when it was cool, the classes were for the monks, and in the afternoons when it was hot, the nuns could go. So that was very unfair, and that's been mixed up now. And but this new place that's just opened, which is just about to open, by the nuns, being run by the nuns, it's immensely radical, and also it's radical in its conception because it's not just there for the training of other nuns. It's there for the training of monks and nuns. It's also there for the training of lay people. It's also there for the training of people of other religions or no religion. So it's completely open to enrollment. One of the first enrollees is my friend who's a monk in the Cao Daist order, which the Cao Dai is the indigenous religion of Vietnam, a very fascinating religion. And he's enrolled in this institute to learn more about Buddhism. So I'm very excited by this sort of development.
The Cao Daoists, they are the ones who have incorporated some great literary figures into their
Oh yes,
pantheon, haven't they?
That's
Tell us a bit about them, Walter.
the Cao Daists are beautiful. They sort of emerged at the beginning of right at the beginning of the 20th century, and they have a most fascinating structure. And their aim is to incorporate all of the religions of the world into one religion. And you can sort of pick the time that it was founded because one of their saints is Charlie Chaplin, you know, and you have really interesting things. Well, with someone like Victor Hugo, who they consider a saint, is actually constantly being reborn into this religion. And so you can he's Victor Hugo's been writing for years now, you know, long since his death. And you can actually meet Victor Hugo and all sorts of other people because the Cao Daist religion believes very strongly in this sort of continual line of reincarnation.
You mean there will be some leader who claims to be Victor Hugo?
That's right.
Reborn,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
other words.
Yeah. And you're reborn into different sections of the sect. So say, look, I'm so sorry, I'm fussing. Thank you. That would be great, actually. So you might be born into the Taoist group, or you might be born into the Buddhist group, or you might be born into the Confucianist group, and you'll be reborn into that group forever and ever. So all the members of your family are in that group. So it's quite interesting. And I love this open nature of it. So the fact that my friend who was a Cao Daist monk has enrolled in this has been allowed to enroll in this Buddhist institute run by nuns is I think is quite thrilling. And I just love how the world is changing for the better. Not just there, but everywhere. And speaking of this sort of this strange gender situation that we have, one of my great objects of devotion, if we could just move my face away here, just here, is Chundi Bodhisattva. And she's a manifestation of Kuan Yin, the goddess or the Bodhisattva of compassion. But she's known as the mother of the Buddhas. So yes, there's a great deal of discussion about whether or not she is simply just another version of Chandi, you know, who is there in the Hindu tradition. So because she looks the same and has many of the same qualities, you know. So she's wonderful, and she's always there somewhere in a temple. And I go to seek her out, and she's holding in each of her arms sort of an emblem, which is emblematic of something of wisdom, of compassion, of enlightenment, and all of those things. And she has her own mantra, which is most beloved of Buddhists. And if you go to a temple, sometimes you can get a little pamphlet which has all of the main mantras that you need to learn. And hers is always in this little pamphlet which is given away for free. But she's part of my life, and she's in part of my devotion, which is a subject I wanted to really get to because I think it's so important to people involved in the tradition of Sri Ramakrishna, because devotion, bhakti, I think I'm one of nature's bhaktis. You know, I really feel this sense of devotion and love wherever I go. And when I stand before a shrine, particularly a very old shrine like this one that you see here, I can absolutely feel the energy of devotion that has flooded towards it over centuries, you know, and I'm moved by it.
That reminds me, not just a shrine, but I've experienced this in India. They've got temples there where people have been worshipping for nearly 1,000 years. And the feeling, and they're always pretty well entirely stone. And it's like those stone walls in the temple are just radiating that accumulated feeling of devotion. I mean, it's quite a distinct feeling you have compared to the newer temples. You don't tend to feel much at all. And I've also experienced that with these ancient cathedrals in England and Europe that I've been into. Same thing. And I wonder how that, you know, I mean, it's so subtle, and you maybe feel you wouldn't be susceptible to that. You need to be more spiritually advanced, but actually, no, it's quite, if you're just a little bit tuned in, you can feel that.
You can feel the energy of devotion, and even people who are quite cynical, people who claim to have no spiritual lives, they'll still always pause before a shrine of some sort, and I believe that's because this sort of energy of bhakti has been swirling around it and through it. So I make it an object of certainty that I visit at least one shrine a day when I travel. In truth, it ends up being about 3 or 4 normally. And then when I'm in Vietnam, because at our house we have a shrine to Kuan Yin at the very top level of the house. If I count my visits to her, it's normally sort of 5 or 6 times a day where I'd sort of where I'm really devoting myself, or no, I'm giving myself to this energy of devotion.
Well, when you do that, what do? You've got some mantras or prayers you recite.
I mean, it may not be admirable. I apologize to the sisters if it's not the right way, but sometimes I just do different things. Sometimes I do recite the mantra. Sometimes I really need to say a prayer in the old-fashioned way, in the way that I was taught. You know, I just feel the need to say a prayer for somebody or something. And sometimes I'm just content to be there, just simply to be there with this energy of devotion. So yeah, I know it's probably, if I had my mind in a more fixed way and I had a more direct spiritual practice, I would probably achieve much more. But I need different things at different times. Yeah. And so when I visit these shrines, I do get lost in a kind of a way, but I'm present as well. But I still will always notice new things because you can see the busyness of this shrine. There's all sorts of things happening. You know, people often think of Buddhist temples. I think they have this vision of Japanese Zen Buddhist temples as being minimalist. You know, very nothing there. But really, most temples I would say are maximalist. You know, they're absolutely packed with things. And if you open a cupboard, like 30 Buddha statues will fall out, you know. They're packed to the gills with things. And so one is always noticing new things as one sort of looks at these places.
Well, in Vietnam, for example, but don't they have some meditation halls, some quiet spaces?
Yes, but this is at the end of them.
Mm.
So this is in fact in a meditation hall. Yeah.
Right.
So you've always got this object of devotion. And again, one is always reminded that one is not one can be revering this object. That's perfectly fine. But also that object is also reminding us of something within ourselves. So that's always the Buddhist way of looking at things. So you know, when I was young and arrogant and thought I knew everything, I used to say to the monks, oh, why are these people coming in here and sort of bowing before objects, you know, and thinking of these things as magical, and when in fact actually they are simply representative of qualities within us. The monks, much wiser, much gentler, and much more spiritually learned, would say to me, you can't know what's in people's minds when they're making that vow, for a start. And maybe that's all they're ready for also at this stage. You know, that's all they're ready for, to think of this thing as a supernatural thing, he said. And then in the next life, it will continue. The evolution will continue, he said. But the most important thing is that they're there. Because there's much worse things that people could be doing than turning up at temples. So yeah, I'm always it gave me a friendlier look at everyone around me, you know.
Yeah, well, I've always grappled with when we've gone to India and gone into so many temples, and try as I might, I can't relate as well as the locals do to all the many shrines in the temple. But I watch them and I envy them that you can see that tremendous faith and deep feeling they have. And
Devotion.
I'm intellectualizing it all and looking at the different gods and goddesses and remembering what they represent. But that feeling, I can't quite bring up that feeling. But I mean, it's in their blood. They've grown up with that.
Well, thank you for that honest admission too, Robert. I think it's not uncommon. Not uncommon. So I want to talk a little bit about Maitreya, the Maitreya Buddha. The Maitreya will be the Buddha of the future, of course. So we're in what's called the Dharma ending age. So we're winding things up, and things are going to get worse. I hate to tell you all, but eventually a new Buddha will emerge, and his name is Maitreya. He's getting everything ready now, and when he comes back, he's going to reintroduce the true law, and people will have an opportunity to learn the truth again.
It sounds very Christian, this sort of.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. The sense of a savior. And in China and in Vietnam, he's become this fellow. And when you mention the Buddha to most people in the West, this is who I think about instantly. You know, this big fat laughing Buddha. And then people are quite shocked when they go to Asia and they this is not in the main halls. You know, it's just outside somewhere. But what's happened is that he's the symbolism is obvious, because in the future, no one's going to struggle to eat. We'll have these wonderful meals, so we'll all be tremendously fat, you know. And often you'll see him with quite inappropriate symbols around him. So sometimes you see figures of the Maitreya surrounded by children. So this idea that in future, everyone will be gifted with lots of children. One of the worst ones is often he'll seen holding a gold ingot or a sack of gold, indicating that everyone will be wealthy in this period when he comes. But everyone loves a smiling face. So it's instinctive, I think, to respond to this image. And I find that whenever I post an image of the Maitreya on social media, they're always the ones that people like and respond to and mention. And I'm sorry to say, most often the comment is, "Gosh, he looks like you, Walter." You know. But I can live with that, because whenever I see the Maitreya presented like this, Yi Lak Thap in Vietnamese or Mino Pho in Chinese, I'm reminded that happiness is indeed one of my jobs. You know, to sort of evoke this happiness and to bring this happiness to the world, no matter what the circumstances. This is a job. This is a spiritual job that I've chosen. And when I see him, I'm reminded of it. Yeah. So I like to go to evening prayers whenever I can. And this is something that is really special to me. It helps to create a pattern to my day. And I just love that time. It's just 1 hour in the evening, normally from 7 till 8 p.m. And I turn up and I'm there with everybody else. And I just delight in the communal sounds and the rhythms, because I can't really understand what's being chanted. Indeed, most Vietnamese can't understand what's being chanted. It's sort of an archaic sort of a form of Vietnamese, which is based around Chinese, and it's a very difficult sort of thing to penetrate, but it's rhythmical and you'll know that sound, the donk 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 of the Buddhist drum, and then of the bells sounding and people bowing at all the right times. No, no, there is some difference. They're all chanting different sutras. I don't have to explain to this audience what a sutra is, and and there's actually there's an interesting thing because I go to temples where they chant the Medicine Buddha Sutra, and at one temple the main monk he'd done his own translation from the Chinese of that sutra, and at another big important temple the main monk had done his own translation from the Chinese of this Medicine Buddha Sutra, and the two of them disliked each other very much. And each said that the other's translation was wrong, you know. So I love that there's this human element to it as well. Yeah. But they just work, whichever temple it is, whichever sutra they're using, they just work through it all year round. So when they finished, they start again.
Was it a particular scripture that they're drawing the sutras from, or was it?
I'd say about 80% of the temples are chanting what is called the Lotus Sutra, which is often called the queen of the sutras in Buddhism. But some temples are chanting the Medicine Buddha Sutra or the Pure Land Sutras. That's normally the range that you get. Yeah. So everyone's working. And then there are also sort of there are sort of ritual elements at the beginning and the end of them as well that are done every single night the same. So there's a pattern to it all. And also, in this day and age, where there are so few monastics, it's one of the only times you'll see monastics. In the old days, you used to see them on the streets everywhere, but because there have become so few, it's one of the only times that you'll see them.
Oh, so that's interesting. Like in Christianity,
Absolutely.
the monasteries, the nunneries, they're having trouble.
They're shrinking, yes, because people are no longer choosing that way of life because material life has become so much better in Vietnam.
What about, do you see many young people going to the temples? Are they
in the evenings? I'd say not. No, no, no. It's normally the domain of the older people still. So it comforts me because it's exactly the same as it is in Australia. If we get to the next slide, I just wanted to say that a big part of it is the communal nature of it all. And I also treat it as a meditation because they can't really understand what's going on. And I just sit there for an hour and I absorb the sound. And there's something so comforting in that that I just am transported. And at the end of it, everyone gets up and their faces are shining and they've all enjoyed themselves, even on the really hot nights. And twice a month in Buddhism, there's something called samhoi, which is called repentance. I don't know if it's in Hindu monasticism, but you have to repent as a community for all of the things you did wrong that month. And it involves bowing 108 times. And I'm talking a full bow from standing up to getting down on the ground. And often I'm busy on those nights, you know. It's a big job for a big man like me. But also it allows me to meet people I normally wouldn't, you know, these wonderful people who have become friends, people, women in their 70s and men in their 80s who've got wonderful stories. And we've become friends. Just recently, I was in one of the Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City is building these huge supermarkets, gigantic supermarkets, you know, and people are loving them and flooding into them. And I was at one of the really, really big ones doing my shopping, and one of my dear friends from Temple, who was like a 90-year-old woman, rushed up to me and grabbed me, and we were chatting away. And her very sophisticated and elegant young granddaughter was with her, thinking, why the hell does my grandma know this man? You know, she just couldn't figure it out. But this is where we'd made our wonderful connection. Who knows from lives past or not? I think I've spoken here before about Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, the great Buddhist figure. She's much beloved in the Buddhist world. She's a symbol of all these things which I've written here: compassion, mercy, healing, generosity, happiness with others, which is one of my favorites, patience and understanding. Happiness with others is also called sympathetic joy, which is a quality I know is there also in Hinduism. It's one of the toughest ones, I find, especially if a friend wins a prize that you wanted to win or something like that, you know. But she's so important that often people will have a shrine to her in their house and not to the Buddha, for example. Even though they're devoted Buddhists, they'll choose Kuan Yin instead because her symbolism is more powerful and more important. So I always seek her out wherever I go in Vietnam. Here's a wonderful little hidden one in a neighborhood temple. I kind of like the neglected ones because I figure that they're just there for us to glance at. And the thing about these figures is because we know they're symbolic, because we know they're representative of something. When we see them, we know that all of her and all of these qualities, these benevolent qualities, are inside of us as well. They're not for us to gain, to work towards, or to achieve. They're actually already there. We just have to allow them to be. And when I'm strolling through the temple grounds and I look under a tree and see her there, I am reminded. I am reminded.
Is there a Buddhist version of Durga or Kali?
No, but there are what are called the wrathful deities, and especially in Tibetan Buddhism, but also in general Mahayana. It's interesting, and they are manifestations of Kuan Yin. So you see these terrifying figures at the entrance to temples, really terrifying figures, and they're there for the protection of the temple, but they're actually manifestations of this gentle, beautiful mother. So it's often a surprise for people. They just think, oh gosh, that can't possibly be her. But she's the greatest of the bodhisattvas. So she's the greatest of these figures that have renounced renounced the possibility of enlightenment until everyone on earth is enlightened. And that's such a beautiful idea. And Kuan Yin is the greatest of all of these, and she reminds us of them.
The more you talk, the more I can see where Christianity's got a few of their teachings from, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm hearing it again with this.
Yeah. Well, I give a whole talk on Kuan Yin in which there's some really interesting interactions between Christian Catholic missionaries and their encounters with Kuan Yin when they first came to China. So
Well,
yes.
You might know, I've always been fascinated about John the Baptist and how he was practicing things to a way outside the Jewish tradition, the type of austerities he was practicing. So one scholar has talked about the Essenes, who were a Buddhist group. I don't know whether you've read about that, Walter, and,
I have read about
and the
this sort of
possible
stuff.
influence
Yeah.
of them on well, pre-Christianity and through to Christian teachings.
I have read about that, and it's fascinating. I mean, none of it's really provable, but it's interesting speculation. Yeah. And also, as Jung would have said, an indication that actually we're all sharing in this great unconscious, that there's that they're actually no matter what our race or our creed or our anything, these ideas are there within us anyhow. So they're all just manifesting in different ways. And as I said, she's the Mahasattva, the great one. So she's always there right outside the Buddhist temples. And through her assistance, we see through illusion. So it's through Kuan Yin within us, we see through illusion. And the Vietnamese, and this will be of great interest to all of you, always call her the mother. So she's the mother. Sometimes people call her the mother Buddha, which is technically incorrect, but it's used anyway. But my favorite appellation that they often use is Mẹ Hiền, which is gentle mother. And so when you're in her presence, you can just talk to her, and she is your gentle mother who listens. Her name actually means the hearer of the cries of the world. So that's what's happening. She's there to listen to everybody, which is why this is one of my favorite ones. You can see her there. I'm not going to go into details, but she's in a very disreputable area of Ho Chi Minh City, and she's open all night, and people come to her all night long and say their prayers because she's there as a beacon. And the temple's chosen this intentionally because they want to say to everyone around there, we don't care. You know what you've done wrong, or you know what you're doing wrong. We all want to be better. Just come anyhow. Just come anyhow, and she'll hear your prayers and she'll hear your cries, and together we will improve, and together we will go to that place where we want to go. This is this is a little temple near our house, and it's a tiny little back alley temple, and they've got this terrace that you can climb up on, and you can sit at her feet any time of the day or night, and you can recite her mantra. And I always go and visit her there, and normally around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's no one there at all. And one day I arrived, and there was a woman there. She was the same age as me. We talked about it, and she was busy cleaning, and the whole area is always completely spotless. And she was cleaning. She was cleaning a statue and the shrine and the floors. And I just assumed. I said, "Oh, are you living in the nearby streets?" And she said, "No, no, no. I live quite far away." She lived in quite a posh area. She said, "But I grew up here, and this is quite a working class area." And this shrine helped me through a very difficult part of my life. So twice a week, I get on my motorcycle and I drive all the way over here, and I just clean. I clean everything. And that was her work of devotion. And it was so beautiful and so wonderful.
I gather, Walter, you know Vietnamese. You're communicating with these people in Vietnamese, I presume.
Yes, that's
Yes.
right. Yes. I don't make any claims to being a great Vietnamese communicator, but I get around. Yeah. I do my best. And it's said that reciting her name just 108 times in a day is enough to achieve enlightenment. So just reciting 108 times a day. But another person who interests me very much is this person, Our Lady of La Vang. And I might have mentioned her to you here before, but she is the manifestation of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Vietnam. And she appeared to the persecuted Vietnamese Catholics. They had to flee to the forests so that the royal family wouldn't kill them. And they were all dying of malaria in the forests. And they prayed and prayed to Mary. And one day she appeared to them. That was totally different to the way that Mary had appeared to them before, because this time Mary was a Vietnamese woman and the Christ child was a little Vietnamese baby. And so this is Our Lady of La Vang. And in Vietnam, there's quite a sizable Catholic population. And one of the things that people do is when they build a house, if they've got enough money, if you've built a nice house, at the very top of the house, you put a big marble statue, and normally it's of Kuan Yin, of the Bodhisattva of compassion. But what Catholics will do is they'll put a beautiful white marble statue of Our Lady of La Vang at the very top of their houses. And of course, you go everywhere by motorbike, and I always love it because you look up and you're speeding along the road, and you look up at the top of all of these houses, and all you can see is this big white blur of the Sacred Mother. That's all you can see. You can't really tell if it's Mary or if it's Kuan Yin, but you know it's the mother, and you know that she's looking down on you. And it's so comforting, and I'm so grateful that people do it. It's a little act of service to the world. But I have to tell you, this habit is an interesting one, of looking upwards, because one day I was looking up and we came to an intersection, and I looked up, and it wasn't a very high house, maybe only 4 stories high. And right on the top of the house was a young man practicing the violin. I guess it's a good place to practice the violin because you don't torment your whole family, you know, only the traffic down below. But I looked up, and at that very moment, he looked down and just paused at his violin, and we just looked at each other. And then we drove on. And I often wonder about him, and I hope he has a terrific career and has enjoyed a terrific career as a violinist. But yeah, the mother is always there. And as I said, I grew up a Methodist. And there's one thing about Methodism, it's the absence of the mother as a holy sacred figure. So I think I was always aching for her in some way. And it's why when I first started reading about Ramakrishna and about his devotions, I was completely blown away by this constant idea of the mother, which is there, and is why it spoke to me so powerfully, and still does. Have we got any time left?
Plenty of time.
Well, I just wanted to tell you about. I like to seek out strange places when I go there. And this is a tomb of a man called Levenswick, and it's right in the middle of the city, and absolutely nobody goes there. And it's beautiful. It's a lovely, quiet park, and you can sit there for hours. It's free. And I just think to myself always, why is nobody here? You know, it's so interesting. And so I'm looking for these places. So this tomb was built in 1832, and Levensweert was an interesting man. He was in fact a general from the north who'd been sent to the south to quell the uprisings in the south of Vietnam, because Vietnam is a very, very long and thin country, and the south is very, very far away from the north. And and more than being a general and trusted by the emperor, he was also a eunuch, and so he had this really interesting position, and and eventually he became rich and successful, and he was given his freedom, and as happened with eunuchs in China as well, they were allowed to marry, and of course these marriages, were substantially just marriages of friendship, and so this tomb of Levensweert has become this great place of lovers to meet, because people are so impressed with the devotion that he had to his wife and his wife had to him, when they had no chance of enjoying a normal sort of married life or a normal family life. So it's actually quite a romantic place. So the only people you ever see at the tomb of Levensweert are lovers and scholars, because he is also a very famous scholar. Yeah, and so young people come here to pray just before their exams, so great success in their examinations. So it's a beautiful place, and if all you encounter during the course of your day are lovers and scholars, you're doing very well indeed, aren't you? It's still a nice place to be. Um, and I find it interesting too that tombs used to be such beautiful places. The tombs of important people were considered to be spiritually powerful places, and they were made very, very beautiful. And today I think we're just scared of them. And I think it's indicative of the fact that we're very scared of the inevitable. We're very scared of the end of life. And so we don't really want to be reminded of tombs, things like this.
We were on Friday night in our discussion. There was a lot of discussion. Was death was one of the themes, and loss, particularly when you've lost a loved one to death, and we had a good discussion. And I was just sharing with the group. Because we're I think all of us here, we believe this. We're more than just a body. That there's something that survives beyond the death of the body. So I like to use the word transition. It's like the great transition when we pass away. And I thought that's the kind of a nicer way to put it. Death sounds very grim, whereas transitions are kind of a softer way
It
to
is a
describe
nice
it,
way.
and a more
It is a
accurate
soft
way,
way.
I would say.
But of course, one of the things that I mean, one of the sort of the stark truths of the Buddha is that the only thing we've all got to look forward to are old age, sickness, and death, and they're not very comforting things to think about. But actually, it's been proven that people who regularly think about these things are actually happier than people who ignore them.
Well, the other thing that bemuses me is with the Vedantic path Buddhism as well. What are we ultimately trying to do? We are ultimately trying to get rid of our individuality. We are striving to not exist as an individual anymore, which is kind of strange in a way sometimes if you think about it. But of course, we know that when you become more advanced spiritually, then you welcome that, because you're going into something, you're merging into something that is so much better than what you're experiencing as an individual. But anyway.
And you lose your fear. You're losing your fear of that loss of individuality. But until that time comes, there's something very useful in Buddhism called the medicine Buddha, and he's there really as a last resort, because people will often say, when there's no other cure, you can chant the medicine Buddha mantra, and he will help you. And he's always there. He's hidden away sometimes in temples in Vietnam, but he's always there somewhere. Sometimes there's very beautiful representations of the seven forms. But this is one of my favorite ones. It's hidden in one of the back rooms in a very old temple, and it's a very humble little painting. But I always go there and say a few prayers for my sick friends and for my sick self sometimes as well. And people say, probably quite rightly, oh, this is all nonsense. This is supernaturalism. You can't invoke healing for somebody else and for yourself. And I think, well, they're probably right, but what I can do is invoke a little bit more peace within myself. And if I can bring that peace to another person who is sick or ill, then I actually have done something.
Well, that reminds me of something I've heard about, where increasingly meditation in the West is infiltrating the medical system. And for example, one of the major hospitals in Melbourne, where they're dealing with people who have chronic pain. Now, with the chronic pain, then you're taking a lot of medications to try and deal with that. They all have their side effects, so it's adding to your misery in a way. So what they do, they train this. They get a group of these people who are under that sort of treatment, and they teach them to view the pain in a different way. So instinctively, we resist and fight with the pain, whereas they teach them to accept it and then to even observe it and to step back from it. And you're using meditation techniques to help you develop that ability. So they have found that they've been able to reduce the medications that these people are on, and that's helpful with the amount of side effects they might be dealing with, is minimized. So it's interesting how there's a bit of, medicine Buddha, if you like, approach that relates to that.
There's a great deal of comfort that comes to the spiritual life that we're all conscious of. I wanted to show this because I know some people in the room will be very familiar. This is a nun's office in one of the nunneries that I visit, and I kind of I took a quick photograph of it, and I liked the way it's kind of intimate and private and functional, but it's also very, very public. You walk past it, it's sort of open. You can see it's open to the garden. And it always reminds me too that the back end of an operation is always very, very important. So it's not just these beautiful halls and statues that you see. Equally important is the administrative offices, the kitchens where everyone is fed. And one of my favorite places in many big temples, there's always a secret room somewhere where some of the monks are preparing the flowers to be offered. So if you can infiltrate the flower room, you'll see lots of busyness happening there as well. And I always like to think that there are all these sort of secret spaces hiding in religious institutions. I used to know years and years ago a monk, a very famous temple, very big temple, and I'd been there. It must have been dozens of times. And finally, I met him, and he invited me to his room, and he had the most extraordinary room, which I never knew existed. It was actually upstairs and just above the Buddha's head, and he had his own secret little window. And it was his job every Sunday to record the sermons, which he did from that little room. And it was hidden up there in this beautiful ornate space. And I thought, gosh, there's a secret everywhere, isn't there? And it might take you a lifetime or several lifetimes to discover all of these secrets. Robert, can I speed forward to the end? Because there's something I really wanted to say. So just quickly, close your eyes, everybody. Pretend you're not seeing a thing. What I wanted to say, that the most important thing is that we travel in order to reset ourselves. And travel has been happening for a long, long time. And travel is absolutely linked with the idea of pilgrimage. The first travelers were doing so for spiritual reasons, and it's something that we do sometimes unknowingly. So many people, they just might go on a carnival cruise, not knowing that they're on some sort of soul pilgrimage. But really, all of us are on a pilgrimage, and all of us travel because we think there's something that I need to know. There's a question that is yet unanswered. And I always say that after I've traveled and when I come back, I can get excited again over a tree or a flower, because you can walk past the same tree or the same flower for weeks, the place that you live. And after a while, you don't see it anymore. But when you go away for a while and you come back, and suddenly everything's fresh again, including yourself and including your own spiritual quest. One of my favorite travelers was a Japanese poet called Basho. He's a tremendous man. You should look him up. And he recorded his travels not in sort of standard styles, but in very, very simple little poems. And he was at a place called Nara. I don't know if you've been there. It's a beautiful, holy city in Japan, filled with these ancient temples. And he was in Nara and seeing all of the beautiful things about Nara. And he overheard a bell in the afternoon. And he wrote one of his most beautiful poems, which I'll read to you now. And it's simply this: the temple bell stops, but the sound keeps coming out of the flowers. So our travels might stop, but the wisdom and the realizations from those travels, they keep flowing from us for the rest of our lives. Thank you. That's all.
Jordan. Well, all right. Yeah, I can say turning point for me was the first time I went to India, and that really changed me. I came back a changed person. I was there for 3 months, and I really did get out amongst the people. I was traveling around with some of the monks of the Ramakrishna order, so I really went in behind the scenes and had a lot of experiences there. And yes, I never quite, forever changed me.
Yeah.
And I think what I detect from you, what is obvious from reading your books too, I think there are travelers and there are travelers. There are travelers who just go along for a holiday, and they don't. Well, I've detected this in some people. They haven't really absorbed the culture much. Yes, they've seen things, they've experienced things, but somehow haven't thought about it or really seen, and haven't really looked at the culture. And I appreciate it that about reading your books and hearing from you that you are very perceptive and sensitive, and you really go deeply into where you are, the culture, the characters. So I think that's the great opportunity travel gives us if we are willing to make that effort. And of course, I know in your case you've had all these adventures and experienced great discomfort and maybe experienced fear.
Yes.
You had that sense of adventure. I've had a bit of that too in my travels. So I feel that's all part of the mix too. You've got to be a little bit daring, otherwise you won't get as much from it. But my contact with Asia, that's taken me out of my Anglo world. I'm very thankful for that. I grew up like you did, very, very Anglo monocultural society. And the wonderful thing about India and Asia in general, it experiences you to a whole different way of viewing existence. If you could go ahead, I've got just a few slides. Speaking of Anglo world, yeah, well, I'm going to take you to the Anglo world because I went to Rome. Just click on the little arrow there, Vin. No, not that arrow. Get the video playing. So I was staying near the Vatican, and I got up early. This is early winter, and one of the most famous places in the world. And there you see, I've got it almost to myself. Would you believe? So just get a pan around. It gives you a little glimpse of what it's like to come out into St. Peter's Square there early in the morning, very cold, and I experienced some calm and peace there where normally it's going to be a hive of activity, this fabled place in the world. Just go a little bit further, just so you got an idea of what it's like to stand there. And I've just panned right around.
Well, that's the early morning energy that we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. Just go to the next one, Ben. This is inside the Vatican. So I've got to say, Italy in general had a tremendous impact on me, like India. It was a revelation. And you go into these magnificent places, you don't know where to look. You're just surrounded by art. I mean, saturated with art, all these places. Just amazing. I did go my first morning in Rome. I did go, well, roaming in Rome, and I went down one little nameless little alleyway, And then I saw there were built into the walls was the entrance to a church. So it was like a big wall, several stories, apartments and whatever else. But in amongst that were the two doors that took you into a church. And this church would be unknown to tourists, just a local church. So I opened the doors and went in. And again, you're just overwhelmed. Wherever I looked, on the ceiling, the walls, the floor, there's beautiful tile work on the floor. There's all these frescoes on the walls. It's just saturated with art. And it's just me. And there were two priests there. This is early in the morning again. And these two priests were chanting and they were lighting candles. There were so many candles there. And they're just lighting the candles. And then they noticed I was there and just kind of smiled. And I just sat there, just entranced. And this was centuries old, this church, but nameless church. Nobody would, the tourists, nobody would have heard of it, I'm sure. And so that's what Italy does. It just continually amazes you with the amount of heritage there. Just go to the next one, Ben. Now, is it this one? I've got to have a close look. This is the main dome in St. Peter's Basilica. Sorry, everyone. You'll understand what I'm trying to do in a minute. Just go to the next one, Ben. I'm trying to find, no, go back. I've lost it. It's so hard to detect this. There's a couple of, the previous one is, yeah, thanks. You go back to the previous one. Somewhere, okay. Now what I'm going to do. Oh, wow. After I took the photo, I happened to notice that there were two people there working, and I thought, my gosh, what? Have you can? Didn't know about that, Fred. Wish. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just remarkable. So yes, here we go. What do I need to say? Just look at the immensity and majesty of that. And I haven't put the photo in, but there's the famous painting of Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. And it's got we had a good guide and she was telling us about that. I'm sorry, I haven't put it in here, but in the bottom right-hand corner, it's depicting people being flung into hell. So when Michelangelo was doing the painting, and it took quite a long time to do it, one of the officials in the Vatican was getting upset with what he was doing. For one thing, he was depicting people naked, and they were a bit upset about that. That's, it's a bit immodest. And Michelangelo's reason for that was we come into the world naked. So he wanted to depict the people naked. So the whole picture as a whole is depicting people going up into heaven and people being flung into hell and so much more. Anyway, this official who was becoming quite upset with Michelangelo and criticizing his work. So Michelangelo is a very prickly character. And so after a while, that official came to look at the painting again. So, he's going to go and have a look at it and get ready to make some more complaints. And boy, he had something to complain about because one of the figures being flung into hell, he found had his face. Michelangelo had gone and painted his face on one of the figures being flung into hell. So anyway, that's just one of the little stories around these, the human factor, as you were touching on before, Walter, behind these masterpieces. So just go to the next slide and just play that. Yeah. Now this is Assisi. I was so happy the tour I went on included Assisi, and just going to show you we've arrived and we're going to walk into Assisi, and then something magical happens. You'll see. Just lower our little box a bit more, Ben. Yeah. So I'm just panning around. Assisi's in a beautiful, the village, like a village built on top of a ridge, and almost like a castle with this beautiful locally quarried stonework throughout. And now watch, just as we enter, here comes some Franciscan monks walking past. It just so happened when we walked in, they came past. So it was a nice little touch. The guide was very happy that we could see some monks. Just go to the next slide, Ben. And what they were doing, this was just in the lead up to Christmas. So they're making the nativity scene out of sand. Just lower that box there, Ben. So there's again, you know, the artistry of the Italians. They can't help themselves. So it's very elaborate, big structure of sand, you know, just outside the main church there for St. Francis. As you see, you walk past this, it's not quite finished. We're a bit too early for that. They would have finished it within about another week. And this is just some of the alleyways. We went walking. This is in Assisi. And because it was early winter, there's nobody around. I can recommend the best time to go to Europe is actually winter. You don't have the crowds and you can get the atmosphere of the place. And so we just went, we had some time, a couple of hours just to go wandering down all these alleyways and the beautiful stonework. I think, yeah, so that's it. That just stop the share, Vin. Just click to stop the share. So, yeah, thanks, Walter. I mean, really, we could, I know you've got so many stories. I mean, we didn't get to hear about all the fabulous characters you got to meet in your travels. I think that could be a separate session one day, just to hear about the people you've met, all types. That's a lot of stories you could tell. But yeah, time goes too quick. We could have easily sat with you all day. But we're very thankful for you coming. Yeah. Thanks everybody for it.